All right, I want to say welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us for our FERPA training today. Sarah Schumacher is our registrar at Blue Ridge Community College, and she's going to be speaking with us today about FERPA. She'll go through the ins and outs with us, and she'll also give us a chance to answer some questions and then ask some questions. So there'll be plenty of time for discussion. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to go on mute because from now on, I'm just the driver. Take it away, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. So my name is Sarah Schumacher. I'm the registrar at the college. I've worked here for 18 years full-time this April, and I've been in the registrar's office the entire time. So today I have a presentation for you about FERPA. And so I will tell you right now, if you have ever attended another FERPA presentation besides yesterday, this is unlike any other FERPA presentation you've ever seen. So it's a very long, detailed, honestly boring topic, but we will try to make it as interactive as we can. We do have some questions that we're going to be asking you, as Sarah mentioned. So we are going to quiz you, and you cannot leave the session unless you pass. So good luck to you. So first of all, what is FERPA? FERPA is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. It is a federal governing body that tells us the information we can and cannot release about students. So it's very similar to what we talk about with staff and faculty, different employees, but this is strictly from the student's perspective. So it was established in 1974 due to the Buckley Amendment. It has been active for a very long time, but it has changed a little bit over the last couple of years, and we're expecting some more changes in a session we're going to attend in March. So traditionally speaking, FERPA applies to our students who are ages 18 and older, regardless of whether they are a graduate of high school or not. However, at a post-secondary institution, regardless of whether the student is 18 or not, FERPA still applies to those students under 18 as well. And the information that we'll be discussing is what is known as directory information. So those are key identifiers that talk about the student in ways that we can discuss, whether it's a third-party organization calling another institution, or mom and dad because I paid for my students' tuition. So directory information is a really important word. And even though I've been at the college for, quite honestly, a very long, old time, I actually do have that printed and pasted on my computer because I can't always remember it. And in fact, this past year, we as an institution elected to narrow down our directory information list just to try to protect our students a little further. The reason for that being, we were getting so many requests almost every day, definitely weekly, wanting access to student information to send them spam messages about politics or spam messages for deals. And with the different trade agreements going on today, we can't spam our students in that manner. We also just don't want to do that. It's not ethical. So we have a large list of directory information that is given to us as options by FERPA, but we as an institution have narrowed that list to about half. So like I mentioned, it's kind of boring, so we can move on to slide 2. So the first question is, why is FERPA important? Is it because we like acronyms? Because you know that we do. We have a lot. It gives us a lot of power, and we like power because it tells us about the information we can and cannot release about students, or because the government said we had to do it. So I think on your phone, you just have to select the answer, and it should automatically record. We can see that there are 6 who have so far. When we get a few more, we will reveal if you guys are following still. 2 slides in. Right, so we've got a little over half. So the results say we're all doing a great job. So first one down, next to go. So again, FERPA is about the information that we can and cannot legally release about students. So this long list that you're seeing is all directory information that is eligible to be released about a student per FERPA. So obviously the student's name, we can talk about their dates of attendance. For example, if I have a future employer calling saying, hey, Sarah, did this student attend? Can you tell me when they did? Can you tell me what program they were in? Can you tell me if they graduated with anything? Yes, I can answer those questions. We would say things like, yes, this student attended fall 2021 through spring 2023. They were awarded an associate's degree in nursing on May 9th, 2023. We can go so far as to give actual dates and say that they attended August 17th, 2021 through May 9th of 2023, but we try not to do much more than that. And we will verify if the student graduated their credential on the exact date, but we do not talk about if they were an honors graduate or anything like that. We are definitely able to talk about their program of studies. So if they did not graduate, we can say things like the student was enrolled in horticulture technology at the time of their attendance, but they did not receive a credential. When we talk about enrollment status, that's whether or not the student was full-time or part-time. So full-time is an enrollment of 12 hours or more. Part-time is an enrollment of 1 to 11 hours. We can get a little bit more specific if they really push us, and we can sort of revert to the financial aid definitions. You know, you have your less than half-time, three-quarter time, and full-time. So if somebody really needs to know, we can say, okay, well, they were three-quarter time, and three-quarter time is defined as 9 hours to 11 hours of enrollment. We will still not say, oh, yes, they were enrolled in 8 hours. We just give the broader specifics of information that you could find if you look on our website or if you look in the catalog. We also, as you can see, there's some odd things on this list about the recent institutions attended, their place of birth. We don't know where our students were born. And you do see things on here like the full address, the email address, and things like that. We don't have sports activities anymore. That last line actually used to say recognize sports, but we would be able to say things like the student is a member of Phi Theta Kappa or PBL, things like that. And so I think the next slide is, yes. So these are the ones that Blue Ridge has elected to say yes to. We will give out this information: the student's name, the county in which they live, the dates of attendance, the degrees and things awarded, the program of study, if they are in a recognized activity, and their photograph. So every time a student does an application for admission, there is a caveat on there that they have to sign off on that says, I consent to release my photograph to be used for marketing activities or things in conjunction to the college, et cetera, et cetera. It's worded much better than that, but we do go ahead and place that in the upfront for every application that our student does, so that way we can freely use their images as we need to in ways that positively benefit the student and the college without fully releasing it in odd manners to the public. So if someone's calling in saying, hey, I want their picture, we're not going to do that. We are only going to use that image for a school-related activity. So the reason why we have elected to really narrow this list is because we just want to protect the student. We have had so many situations in the past where people have pretended to be another person. We don't want them trying to get things like their schedule to show up at that time. We don't want them having their address. We don't want some random person trying to show up at that student's house doing who knows what. So the purpose behind FERPA is protection. And even though this may feel or seem a little bit excessive, really it's not. We just really want to do our best job in protecting the student. So I think we can go to the next slide, which is a question. So does Blue Ridge release all types of directory information? Yep. We give it all out, or nope, we restrict some things to protect the student further. And if you can't tell by now, I made these questions. So, hope that is helpful. Right, you're doing a good job. So we got 100%. So again, we do not release all of those directory information items because we do want to protect the student. So we can go to the next slide. So there were a couple specific situations that we'll cover. We do not release the student schedule. If the student themselves calls us and says, hey, where am I supposed to be at 9 o'clock? I don't know. I'm sorry. You need to either check your My Blue Ridge, check your watermark. You need to come get a schedule. Or something that we'll talk about in a couple more slides is we'll have to validate that the student is who they say they are before we can discuss this critical directory information. We did, if you'll notice that second line, it says that we had, don't call in pretending to be the Laurel Park Police Department. We had a very messy love triangle many, many years ago, where the jilted, now ex-girlfriend, called posing as the Laurel Park police officer, trying to get the schedule of the new girlfriend, who was also a student, because she wanted to meet them up after class. And so the reason why we use this particular example is because obviously, as a police officer, you would think, okay, sure, we'll just give them that information. They're a police officer. But no, this is a prime example of why we don't just give out that information, even to other entities like external police departments. Now, our Blue Ridge Police Department is different. They are employees associated with a college, they are part of our college, and so that operates a little bit differently. But if we had a third party organization, such as another police department, wanting that information, they either have to have a warrant or a subpoena or something like that, where we would give that information. And so there are times where the student or the student's family members or whoever may be experiencing an emergency. And so the way that we handle that is if the family member calls in and says, hey, I need to talk to my student because XYZ has happened. They need to know, and I can't get a hold of them. Well, we do not place them in contact with that student. Either the front desk or our office particularly will try to get a hold of that student on that person's behalf, or we will send the Blue Ridge Police Department officers to go and get that student in their classroom if they happen to be on campus. Even if it's in the case of an emergency, we are not going to directly connect that third party to that student. And so what we do is we place the onus of opportunity in the student's court to say, do you want to reach out to this person? Here is this information. They're trying to get in touch with you. You do what you feel is best. And so also on this list of things that we do not give out is grades, GPA, the number of credits earned, whether or not they are attending a course. And so a small caveat to that one is we get that question quite a bit in our office, and I'm sure that you as faculty members get that as well. If we even had that information, we would not share that. Thankfully, we don't have access to your attendance information, and so that makes it a little easier for us to say no. But there are times that we would have a mom or dad call in and say, hey, did my student attend so-and-so's class today? Well, even you as a faculty member should not give that information to the parents because that does not fall under directory information. Schedule, attendance, you don't want them trying to learn what their schedule is, trying to predict when they're going to be there. We've had situations in the past where, unfortunately, just by simply saying that I'm sorry, the student is not currently enrolled at this time, parents or whoever have learned that their student was not actually enrolled and using the money towards tuition like they thought that they were. So sometimes there are some very intricate situations that can be a little bit messy, and that's also why we do not provide information regarding attendance, and you should not either. And so the last two things on this list are social security number and student ID. And so to talk about them separately, but to talk about them similarly, at Blue Ridge, we treat the student ID like a social security number because it is a unique number that is given to the student one time and it is never changed. However, with our newer students, their email addresses do have their student ID. There's a multitude of reasons for why that change took place. In the long run, it will be a good thing. And the nice thing about the student webmail is it is also a uniquely issued email address from the college that the state recognizes to be a unique login with a unique passcode and a unique password, which is a lot of uniqueness. But in this instance, we have the freedom to do that with their email. However, if a student calls in to us and says, hey, I can't find my student ID, I don't know what that is, we're either going to need to validate them or we're going to direct them to My Blue Ridge because that's on multiple screens in there with their user profile information. I'm pretty sure it's in course planning somewhere and in the advising tabs. Social security number, as we are about to learn, is a real bad word. So we never give out the social. We only ask for the social security number on two different forms. That is our application for admission and change of program form and the data change form. And the reasons why is because social has become such a hot topic issue with personally identifying information. And it is so easy to get nowadays into enact identity theft that we only ask for it where we absolutely need it. And that's where it ties into residency or RDS. and that is because the state requires it. So I don't really know the rhyme and reason behind all these things. I just know that that's how it is. But I have to talk more about social security number in a second. So if we want to go to the next slide. Can you freely give out grades, GPA, a student schedule, their attendance in a course to anyone who asks? Yes, because we believe in being fully transparent in everything that we do. Or no, this is not directory information. Fantastic. I mean, I rambled on about it for forever, so that's great. So social security number is the new bad word. And it's really honestly not that new anymore, but the pandemic really heightened that information. Because of FERPA and the changes and the high risk of identity theft. And as you all know, if you've been in the community college system or any college system in the past year or two, there have been a lot of instances where colleges have been compromised and the data has been gathered from them. We do not ask for a social. And my biggest piece of advice to you, if you deal with students and you are emailing information, do not ever, 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 ever put a social security number in the email. There are systems that our IT department have employed that will notice if you are sending SSNs. Ask me how I know. That's because sometimes I have to send reports that have an attachment with social security numbers, and that got flagged. So there are things that we do to encrypt those things, but if you are just generically talking to a student, even if you're using their student webmail account, please do not send their social security number in that email. Don't send their student ID if you don't have to. Now, obviously, if they're emailing you with one of the newer ones, that kind of is what it is. But just as a reminder to all of you, we work for the state, for the community college system. All of the information that we send through email is public record. And so that means that anything that we do, whether it's just a generic, one-on-one email or a big blast email, all of that information can be requested at any point in time. And that is another reason why we do not want to see social security numbers in there. So when we talk about validating a student, that's something that our office does quite often. And it's something that you have the power to do as well, whether you are staff or faculty. If you have your student who's your frequent flyer, you pretty much know who they are sometimes, but just talking to really any student, you need to validate them. The way that our office does that, every time that we ask a student for their information, we say, okay, what's your last name, your first name, what's your date of birth? So date of birth is a really simple key identifier to at least ensure that you have the correct student in the system or when you're advising them or registering them or whatever the case may be. When we need to go through the validation process, think about it like you're trying to call Duke Energy and pay your power bill, but they won't just randomly take anyone's money over the phone. You got to answer 500 questions to validate who you are to pay your bill to keep your lights on. So that's basically what we're doing, but in a much nicer way. And so we will try to ask things of the student that really only the student should know, because sometimes if you were to talk to my mom on the phone, we sound pretty much just alike. It's very easy for parents to pose as the student. So we'll ask them things like, what was a personal email address that you put on your first application? Or who was your advisor when you were here? Or what program were you in? What was the class that you took? And what was the grade that you made in it? Things that are really, really specific that hopefully only the student will know the answer to. And so we try to ask about 4 or 5 questions like that. Once we feel comfortable that, okay, this student is who they say that they are, then we can discuss some more of those directory information pieces like, this is your student ID. This is the grade that you made in that class. But we do not give that sensitive information without first validating that the student is who they say they are. So we can go to the next slide. So for the 100th time, should you ever ask a student for their social security number? Yes, and make sure to get their credit card info while you're at it, or no, that's no longer appropriately identifying information. Somebody has ulterior motives.
I was about to say that we've got a bunch of A students in here, but we may, I'm not going to talk about their grades, but
Okay, I'm going to admit it was me, but I had to do it. I had to click that answer.
You just wanted to see,
Okay.
you just wanted to see what it looked like.
We are state workers, Wanda. I don't blame you. Okay. So this is a back-to-back question. How can you validate that a student is who they say they are? Say, this is me. Is this you? Or don't bother to ask. You've talked to them a million times. And to be honest, we do have some of those students. You need to ask questions such as their date of birth, their email address, who is their advisor, etc. Or like Wanda, charge them $5 and move on with your day. Wanda's charging $5. But good job for the rest of you. So yes, make sure that you ask those really important, pertinent questions to validate them. So I did sort of already talk about this, but it really cannot be emphasized enough. Do not send a social security number through the email. They will find you and they will catch you. Try not to send a student ID if you don't have to. That has changed a little bit since this has been updated, but we still want to be very careful about freely giving out that student ID simply because it can unlock a lot of information about the student with their My Blue Ridge and things like that. If a student is emailing you from that unique student webmail account, you're pretty much okay. FERPA considers that to be a school issued account, again with the uniqueness, which is why that makes it count as a secure login. So there are some loopholes to things that we do if the students are using that student webmail account because it is considered a secure login.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
I have a quick question about the student ID through email. For ASL tutoring, they ask us for the students' IDs. So I do feel a bit guilty for that. Tutoring center always asks for ID. So I'm not sure what to do with that.
Are you talking about the tutoring center on campus?
Okay, I do not always
Yes, correct.
ask. I do
For
not.
ASL, Wanda
Right.
That's okay.
generally sends that in the email.
Yeah, that's okay.
Am I breaking FERPA by doing that?
No. So this is when you're talking with students. So when you're talking with other employees of a college, we all sign disclosure contracts, whether we're staff or faculty. So we are not allowed to discuss that information.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Phew. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then just another reminder that your email is public record, so always keep it clean. We can go to the next question. So I'm sorry, we just have to do it again. When is it okay for you to send a social security number through the email? Every day of the week or never? And IT is going to know. The questions do get better after this. Perfect. Yes. So please, no socials. And tacking on to the question that was just asked, do not send socials even when you're talking employee to employee, because again, that's public record. Student IDs are okay if you're talking to a fellow coworker or another staff or faculty person or the tutoring center, things like that. But social security number is no every single time. So there are times that a student may come to us and say, I don't want my information given out. We've actually had a couple of students who have been in witness protection programs. I'm not making that up. And so they have to kind of go the extra mile to protect their information. And so there is a form for that. We have 2 forms that we will not do electronically. You have to be there physically present in front of us. We have to make sure that you are not under duress, the student. And we have to make sure that the student physically signs the paper in front of us. And so this do not release information form is only available with our office, the registrar's office. It's got to be physically signed. And what happens when that gets placed on a student's record is a lot. And there are pros and cons. So while it does protect the student, it makes every other process very difficult. The only offices that have access to that student's information is our office one person in financial aid, one person in cashier, and one person in business office. And what that means from the faculty standpoint is that you can talk to that student. That's fine. If they come to you and say, hey, can you help me make a schedule? That's okay. What you're not going to be able to do is see their record. So you won't really be able to know what classes they've taken. You won't be able to create a course plan for them. You can make them a schedule as best as you can, but our office is probably going to be the one to register them. What it also means is that the student can't make transcript requests or anything like that. They have to come physically present in front of us. And we are going to check their signatures against other signatures within the file to make sure that that person still is who they say they are. So the other drawback is that if that third-party organization calls in and needs to verify the enrollment or the graduation because they're trying to get a job, we have to use terminology such as, I'm very sorry, I am not able to discuss that student at this time. I'm very sorry, I cannot discuss that record with you. Things like that. We basically have to act like the student does not exist. So while it is very protective for the student, it does really limit that access in the flow of information. If the student wants to have that taken off, it is again, they come to us, they write us a letter in front of us, they sign it, and they say, please take that off my record. I think we can go to the next one. So do we provide information for students that have a do not release information on their file? Yes, but again, it's another fee. Or no, because few people have access on campus and we act like we don't know who they are. And so if you as faculty are trying to access that record, you're going to see record access denied anytime you try to look at that student. That is correct. So no information is provided about that student. So then we have the flip side. We have the other form that is not allowed to be done electronically. We've only done that twice, and it was for 2 students in Fayetteville when we had the large program going with interpreter, and they obviously cannot drive 5 hours. But this one is called a release of information form because sometimes our students need a little extra help. Sometimes they may have situations where there's a guardian involved, or we actually had to do this with a caseworker one time. And so it's sometimes okay to give a little extra access, but only if the student gives us permission. And so what happens with this form is that, again, it's only with our office. The actual release of information form is only with our office. There are other forms on campus that are similar, such as student accessibility services and financial aid, but that's different. Those are for those entities about financial aid information or accessibility information. It is not about the student record. Ours is the main one, which is why it has to be done with our office. So if a student comes to us and says, hey, I want to give mom and dad access to my information. Well, to do that, all parties must be present. All parties must sign in front of us, and all parties must show us photo ID. And that is because we're, in essence, breaking FERPA legally. It's not illegal, it is legal. But if we're going to give someone that level of access, we're going to ask the student a lot of questions to, again, make sure that they're not under duress, that these people are not coercing this student into doing something against their will. So we actually do have a conversation with that student. We make sure that they're okay with it. And then everybody signs, we sign, we look at everything, and we put something in the system. Now, if mom had shown up and dad did not show up, we could still go ahead and do the form for the student and the mom. But dad doesn't count. So if dad still wants to get access, student is going to have to come back and do it again with dad. And so once everything is signed and we put that in our system, if you use Colleague, then you would go to a screen called ASPR. There is a little comment section down in the bottom that will have an X, and it is a text limited field. So what we have to do is keep it very brief. We would say things like, Sarah Schumacher has permission to access Sarah Parler's information. So we keep it very cut and dry. We don't have the space to say the relationship. You know, we can't say that I'm her mom or she's my aunt or whatever the case may be. So we keep it really cut and dry. And anytime that person shows up, we still have to validate that that is the person who has the release of information. And what it does not mean is that we can just start talking freely anytime mom or dad calls in or whoever. If they call in and say, hey, I want to know, were they in class today? Or, hey, did they pass this class? Did they make an A? Did they make a C? We would not give them that information, just the same as we would not give that information to the student themselves. They either need to be physically present and they need to validate themselves, whether it's over the phone and we do really not give that information out over email. So it's phone or it's in person. So even though they have a release of information, they still fall under the rules of FERPA. They still can only have access to that smaller list of directory information. And then if they want to discuss things freely, they got to be physically present. Go to the next one. So talking about all this, we talked a lot about how this works for staff every day, but how does it relate to faculty? So that's a really great question, because you guys, it's a little bit different because you're operating differently in the classroom and you're advising them and you talk to them in different capacities than we do. So even though you're faculty or staff, if you are an employee of the college, you must abide by the rules of FERPA. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. If the student is 18 or older, can you tell mom and dad whatever? Nope, you can't. You can't tell them if they're passing or failing, if they're attending or not attending. And there are times where we have had situations that the student is present, and I know I use mom and dad, but that's usually the most common example. Mom or dad may be present and they may be trying to talk to you as the faculty person, and they're maybe talking over that student. So what we would recommend would happen would you would say to that student, okay, I'm happy to discuss X, Y, and Z with you. Are you okay if this person, whoever, stays for this discussion? If the student says no, you should not discuss whatever with that student as long as that person is there. You need to make sure that that person leaves, take the student to your office and talk to them one-on-one. Or there has been a time or two where the parent might become very unhappy and we have to get the police department to remove that person. And so I just saw a question pop up about what if they're requesting that through email. It's the exact same thing. That if that student is 18 or older, you cannot give out that information. So we had a really good question yesterday in yesterday's session about our CCP students, those who are traditionally under the age of 18 and taking classes. And I think that the historical practice has been to sort of freely share that information when in all technicality we should not be. So I actually went into the statutes of FERPA yesterday, and even if the student is under 18, they signed an agreement at the time of their application for admission, whether it be CCP or regular, but particularly if they are CCP, that said that they would be treated as a college level student. So what that means is in the classroom, they are receiving the same information that the 45-year-old student is receiving. They get information no differently. And according to FERPA, even if they are in high school and under the age of 18, if they are enrolled in a post-secondary education institution, they still fall under the rules of FERPA. And so I think I saw another question. So if the parent accompanies the student to the appointment, that's okay as long as the student says it's okay. So it's good to have that dialogue up front to say, hey, happy to help you today. Are you okay if this person is here with you? Most of the time they are. It's been very rare in the past that they say, no, I'm not. So when they're not, we need to do something different. And we either need to schedule that conversation for another time, or they need to leave or come back, whatever the case may be. So it doesn't really matter if they're in person or an email, that student still has to give permission for that person to do what they need to. Now, there are times that we have parents who will register on behalf of the student. What we would recommend is that the student hopefully send you an email from their webmail account saying, hey, so-and-so is coming to do this for me, and I do need these classes, please put me in. Because we don't want to run into a situation where the student is enrolled in classes that they're being charged for, that they don't have an intention of paying for, because unpaid classes go off to collections. So we always want to try to make sure that we have that student's permission. And so in the classroom, talking about FERPA, I think the practice, if you watch a movie from back in the day, you walk up to the classroom and you see the list of grades posted right there as you enter the classroom. So and so passed, so and so failed, whatever, whatever. Does that mean that we should be sharing information in that manner in our classroom? Absolutely not. We do not want to create a situation where we could open the door for bullying if the students find out, oh, wow, we all passed and this kid failed. What's going on? We don't want to create that kind of scenario. If you have a student come up to you while you're in class that wants to discuss information with you, that may not be the best time to do it. If the class is quiet and everyone can hear what you're discussing, and especially if you're talking about sensitive information, then is not the time to have that conversation. You would say, wait till after class to talk to them, or go outside the classroom and have the discussion, or schedule a meeting in your office where you can really talk one-on-one. So although it seems great to do some shout outs for things, that's really not the best practice. We don't want to have those out loud conversations where other ears can hear. And so Rose has asked a good question about, can you say the class average for the quiz was, but not give? Yeah, that's fine, because that's just the class average. I'm not sure I would go and be like, well, 3 of you failed and all 28 of you passed. That's maybe not so great, but if you want to talk about class averages, that's fine. I know sometimes that's important information if you have to talk about rounding the grade or whatever the case may be. But we just don't want to give specifics. So a real hot topic now is whether or not you can use student projects as a template for the next class or the next group or the next cohort. And one thing that we discussed about this yesterday, because they had some questions that were very good that we did some research on. If you are using student media, so that could be a video that they've done, it could be a project that they've written, whatever the case may be, you must have express written consent from that student, giving you as the faculty person permission to use that media for the next class. So if you have a student who just totally knocked this assignment out of the park, I had that one time. She did an amazing job. I'm like, finally somebody actually gets it. And I'd love to show this as an example so people kind of have an idea of what to do. So what I had to do was I emailed her back and forth a little bit. It said, hey, this is great. Can I use this? This is my intention with it. Here's how I'm going to use it. You are not obligated to say yes, but if you do, it's kind of like a contract is what I mean. It was a memo. And I left the place for her to sign. I specified exactly which one I would be using and how, and in which of my classes. She physically signed off on it. I kept it in my records, and that was that. What I did do was I redacted all of her personally identifying information. So I took off there about her name. I took off the class that she was involved in, because a lot of times they'll include that section number. You don't want people trying to figure out that information. And thankfully, it was an assignment that was not personally identifying to her. I know that some of the questions asked yesterday, like with interpreting and with public speaking, a lot of times you want to reuse videos. That's fine. We talked about potentially blurring the faces, but really that's not easy to do technologically. And also, it's not actually necessary, which I found out after the fact. So what we would say is, if you do want to use something again, that's okay if you have their signed consent. And if you do not feel that keeping that paperwork on your own is the best option, I always encourage you to send whatever documentation to the registrar's office, and we will place that in the student's file. So anytime that if we have a situation in the future and we need to go back and reference that, we can always have that in the student record, because if a faculty member retires and that continues to live on through the course, we do want to make sure that that permission can be found somewhere. And so another question was asked about faculty talking to one another about student grades, whether or not that's a FERPA violation. So that is not a question I've been asked before. I do not think it would actually be a FERPA violation, simply because of that disclosure contract that we all sign when we become an employee. Now, theoretically, is this the best thing to do? Probably not. simply because there are a lot of things that we wish we could do in the system to flag or identify students that we straight up choose not to do. For example, the hot topic has been, well, if this student has plagiarized in this class, we need to put something on their transcript, or we need to put a perk or restriction on them so that we know, hey, this student has plagiarized. Well, the end discussion of that is that we're creating a bias towards that student. We don't want them to go into another class where they, may have learned the error of their ways and they're really trying to do a good job. And we don't want that stigma attached to them where the faculty person might be like, I'm really gonna have to keep an extra eye on them because they plagiarize. So while it may not be a direct violation of FERPA to be discussing grades, it may not be the best practice simply because we don't want to introduce those biases in the classroom. And so, long story short, if you would like to use media in your classroom of a student, please make sure you get a physical signature and be specific in your request. It's this video, it will show your face, and I will only use it in these manners, blah, blah, blah. So we can go to the next slide. So can faculty discuss grade dependence information with parents? Yes, because they pay that tuition and they have a right to know. Or no, because if it's not a release of information on file, you cannot discuss that. Good job, good job. We're so close to being done, I promise. I know we're getting close on time. We can keep going. I do like me. So a question was asked really quick. When some faculty have to do credit by exam forms, students will email the form and it'll include like their social or preferably their student ID or their date of birth, and it has their signature. Is that okay? Yes. So if the student, we can't control what the student does. If the student calls me and says, hey, Sarah, pull me up, here's my social, blah, blah, blah. I will probably use that social to the most easy way to identify them. But I'm not going to just go off that. Although I may use that to pull them in the system, I'm still going to ask them those other questions. Okay, sure. But what's your last name? What's your date of birth? All right, thank you. So if the student is filling out a form and the form is what we've created and we've asked for that information, they don't know their student ID. That's why we've defaulted all of our forms to student ID or date of birth. If they give you their social, we can't control that, but they signed off on it. So that's okay. So you can't really reject forms for whatever the student is able to provide to you. We just have to be very careful in how we treat that form. So in cases like that, it might be best just to print and send over that form. But we also have encryption and we've got the secure sign-ins and things like that to try to help that process. So at the end of the day, I understand I'm giving you a ton of information. FERPA, for as easy as it sounds, is really not that simple. It's quite complicated. There are a lot of caveats. There are a lot of ins and outs. And as you can see with every question that we've answered, things are not always cut and dry. So, I've been here a long time, and just yesterday I had to go look up FERPA, and that does not mean that we expect you to be experts. Our office, we try to be as expert as possible. And we do have some newer people in there, so they're learning the ropes too, like Matana, she's our front person. And then we have Emily, she's our backroom person, and we've got Jake, who's the assistant registrar. But what I don't have on here that we always encourage you all to do, if you have a question of any kind, if you have a request, if you want to send us whatever, use our registrar email account, because that is the best way to get in contact with all of us. So if one of us is out, the others can handle it, or they can reference one another or talk to me if they have questions. And so that is registrar. It's just literally registrar@blueridge.edu. And so at the end of the day, we also don't expect you to make decisions about FERPA. If you're unsure, that's 100% okay. It is totally okay to say to that student, you know what, I'm really sorry. I don't know the answer to this question. I need to talk to someone else. Let me do some research and I'll get back to you. And so basically put them on hold, not like literally on hold, but it's okay to say, I'll have an answer for you within 24, 48 hours. And that gives us a little bit of time to try to do the research and make sure that we're remaining compliant. Because at the end of the day, it's like I used yesterday when I was an umpire. We had a little saying that said, "When in doubt, call them out." So if you're in doubt, don't give out the information. It is better to err on the side of protection than it is to give out something that maybe you should not have. So you're always welcome to reference us. You're always welcome to say, "I don't know, let me find out." It's totally okay. So for our next slide, I think is a question. So who are you going to call about FERPA? Ghostbusters? My mom, because she's a very knowledgeable person. Registrar's office, there's 4 of us. Or the state legislatures, because they control everything. See, I knew somebody would say Ghostbusters. My mom's going to be so sad nobody picked her. So I realized today I had a real missed opportunity with memes, but ending this presentation, and I know we've had a good bit of questions already, but do you guys have any more questions, thoughts, concerns about FERPA? And just know that we are going to another training. This one is in person, and when it's in person like that, it usually means that there's going to be some changes. And so with the way that we are changing every day and becoming so much more technologically advanced, I would not be surprised if we saw FERPA get a little bit stricter. And we are always happy to reach out. I can do some more research about Greg's question of whether or not that's a direct violation, but this is a general rule of practice. Even if something is not a direct violation, you still want to operate in a way that is ethical and with integrity to the information of our students. Anyone have any questions?
There's a question in the chat from Michelle Handy. See that, Sarah?
Mhm.
Okay.
So what about students with NC Works, Finish Line grants, child care subsidies, who social workers want attendance verification? So that was very similar to a question we were asked yesterday about apprenticeship. So sometimes we have these third-party entities like the apprentices or workforce development or Buncombe County Partnership, et cetera, et cetera. So when we have those students who are being paid for, especially on behalf of that organization, there's a form that each student fills out. It's that they sign off on, giving us permission to provide that information to the employer or the social worker or whatever the case may be. But also in addition on that form, to giving out that information, it allows us to talk about attendance, because there are statutes and things that those third parties have to meet sometimes, like, okay, they're staying enrolled, they're staying active and current, they're passing, and it talks about that they're going to be a good employee of that organization, and it's really trying to hold that student accountable for a multitude of things. It also allows us to send a transcript at the end of every semester. And so going back to that question from earlier about talking to other employees, there's a small caveat to that, and it's our foundation office. And I don't mean Trina and them specifically. I'm talking about our donors. And so that's a really tricky area, because sometimes when you have a person who, out of the kindness of their heart, wants to give money and help a student, you sometimes want to know a lot of things too. But that does not mean that we give that donor all the information that they request. And that gets a little bit sticky. So what we have learned is that it's best when the student finds that scholarship for that particular donor. Sometimes there are caveats in that scholarship contract that say, okay, they're going to share this information with the donor, things like that. Or we try to word things in a way that helps to answer the question for the donor without giving the actual specifics. So it goes back to that whole, what is information that I can freely find on our website or in the catalog that I can discuss without personally identifying information about that student. So I see there's 2 more things in here. Ben, I didn't know you were in here, but now that I do, I know you know what I'm talking about for the plagiarism. So Dan, I'm not sure what your security classes are for the colleague. Something you can try, and I'll type it into the message here, is ST-ASPR. Sometimes that helps a little bit. Well, that's fantastic. Okay, could you try this one? because I know that they recently updated security classes and maybe they took it away, but I didn't think they would. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm sending that out to everybody. Hold on. And then try that one, SPRO, SPRO.
I'm sorry, where would I type that? I'm actually in
Um,
the league right now and I pulled up a student, so.
Okay, well, then it sounds like you're in the people's category. If you look at the middle, just to the left of that, there's like a little human, and then there's like a little document.
Yeah,
Click on the document.
okay, search a form, okay.
Yeah. So then try ASPR or SPRO, because when you're in the people search, you can just look at the student's information. You can't actually go into screens to see like what classes they've taken. Yeah.
I see
Okay.
this, yes, I've never been here.
Ben, are you on the forums one too, or maybe it switched to person?
I'm sorry?
Ben Hardy was trying to access it as well.
No.
Ben, send me a screenshot.
Yeah, Sarah, so I was using the forms, not the person, to do that. And ASPR and STE-ASPR, neither one worked for me. They
Okay.
came back with differing messages of why they wouldn't work, but they didn't work. SPRO did work. I mean, it
Okay.
brought up a screen where I would input, at that point, a student number or search by name or something.
Okay. Well, you want to put in a student real quick? You just put in mine 206 307.
I was just putting mine in, but yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I don't have my laptop in front of me, so it's not kill the Wi-Fi. But if you go to the very bottom middle, there are like three sets of two drill downs. In the middle one, click the bottom one.
Oh, you lost me on that one, Sarah.
That's okay. We'll connect.
Yeah.
Bottom in the middle where it says additional student profile info.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Do we have any other questions? I want to make sure those get asked either in the
Can I
chat.
ask a quick one?
Yep.
Here, question, concern, I don't know. I'm concerned because in a My Courses shell, students can see the student IDs and the course schedules for all of their students in that section. And that makes me nervous. But maybe that's just me.
How would they see the schedule though?
They can click on the users in that My Course shell and you can see their names and their student ID numbers. And then if you click on that student, you can then see what classes they're registered for this semester.
Okay, well, that should not be happening.
I know we can see it, but I didn't know students could see that.
Yeah, I tested it. My daughter is taking classes here. She's in the room with me right now, so I just had her check it again because I had checked it a semester or so ago.
Okay.
And that's still a thing that's happening is she can click on a student in her class and see their student ID number and what courses they're in this semester.
So just so you guys know, that is, I can tell you, not intentional. There are patches that come out all the time. They're all the time changing stuff. So Jennifer, what I would ask you to do is take some screenshots of what Mary is seeing and submit it.
Do you want me to submit it to you?
Submit it to help desk because Leah needs to go into the permission, like what should,
Yeah.
and I bet it is a change in the
Yeah.
from the last update.
Pathway. CC me though, because if it ever gets brought up, then we can talk about how we address it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Ben, if you look in the bottom left, there's a thing for comments and you go into ATRK.
Cool. I found it.
Cool.
Any other
Okay.
questions as we wrap up? Well, I'm gonna stop the recording.